Hello everyone and welcome to my Soap Twist 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Katie stood in the Manor's stately salon, her hands quivering as she held a crumpled letter. Her auburn hair, which was usually carefully pinned, had become loose, with strands sticking to her tear-streaked face. The room was a flurry of white tulle and roses, remains of what was supposed to be a happy occasion. Luna, clad in a modest cream gown, looked at her with wide, incredulous eyes. The air between them was tense, as if years of whispered truths were finally rising to the surface. "I can't accept you as my daughter-in-law," Katie murmured, her voice low but cutting, each syllable a sword sharpened over years of suffering. The letter in her palm fell to the floor, the ink blurred by the rain that had seeped through her coat. "Not after what you've done." Luna parted her lips but didn't say anything. Her hands, decorated with a dainty silver bracelet, extended as if to bridge the distance between them, but they returned to her sides. Behind her, Electra, Katie's daughter and Luna's fiancé, remained still, her emerald eyes flitting between her mother and the woman she loved. The room felt too small to hold the weight of their emotions, and the walls pressed in as the storm outside raged louder. This was not how the day was meant to unfold. The wedding was intended to be a celebration, a joining of two spirits who had met despite all obstacles. Luna, with her quiet power and sweet laugh, had appeared in Electra's life like a lighthouse guiding a lost ship to safety. Electra, vivid and bold, had been charmed since they first met at a small art gallery, where Luna's works hung like windows into her soul. Their love had grown via late-night chats, shared dreams, and pledges murmured under starry sky. However, Electra's mother, Katie, had never entirely warmed to Luna. Luna could never fully decipher the distance and shadow in her gaze, until now. The letter had arrived that morning, slipping under the Manor's door in an unmarked envelope. Katie discovered it just as the florist was arranging the final of the centerpieces. The lines written across the sheet were a confession, a revelation that shattered the fragile serenity Katie had constructed since her husband's death a decade ago. Luna, it was believed, was not as she appeared. She was the daughter of the man responsible for the tragedy that killed Katie's husband, Michael. The letter described a hit and run, a drunken night, and a truth hidden beneath years of silence. According to the letter, Luna's father, who is no longer alive, was the driver, and Luna was aware of this. "Why didn't you tell me?" Katie's voice trembled as she searched Luna's face for an answer that would explain the treachery. "You knew who I was and who Electra was, and you said nothing." Luna's shoulders slumped as her gaze fell to the floor. "I didn't know at first," she said quietly, her voice barely audible through the rain. "I only found out after we'd already fallen in love. I wanted to tell you, but I was afraid you'd hate me, that Electra would." Her voice faltered, and she clamped a palm to her mouth, stifling a sob. Electra came forward, her fists clenched. "Mom, stop," she pleaded, her voice shaking with fury and despair. "This isn't fair. Luna isn't her father, and she's not to blame for what happened." Katie turned to face her daughter, her eyes brimming with a long-buried anguish. "You don't understand, Electra. You were too young when he died. You didn't see what it did to me, to us. I lost everything that night. My husband, my future, my faith in the world. And now you want me to welcome her into our family? The daughter of the man who took him from me." The room fell silent, save for the distant crash of waves and the patter of rain against the windows. Electra's face crumpled as she struggled between her feelings for her mother and the woman who had become her universe. Luna remained immobile, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. The weight of the past pressed down on them all, too much for any single heart to bear. Katie had never told Electra the complete story about that night 10 years ago. Michael was driving home from a late shift at the hospital where he worked as a surgeon. The roads were sloppy with rain, similar to today, when a driver drove into his lane, sending his vehicle careening off the cliff. The other driver left, leaving Michael to perish alone in the accident. The police never located the perpetrator, and Katie had spent years wondering who could be so heartless. The letter, written by an old acquaintance of Luna's father, stated that he confessed on his deathbed, filled with remorse. Luna, the letter stated, had been present when he talked and had known the truth for years. "I wanted to protect you," Luna murmured, her voice more steady now, despite her shaking hands. Katie shook her head, her lips squeezed into a thin line. "I thought if I could make Electra happy and love her the way she deserves, it might make up for what my father did. I know it's not enough, but I didn't know how to tell you without losing everything. You should have told me the moment you knew. You had no right to keep that from me." Electra grabbed Luna's hand and squeezed it fiercely. "Mom, please. I love her. She's not her father's sins. Can't you see that?" But Katie's heart was fortified by years of anguish and hatred. She had raised Electra alone, pouring all of her love into her daughter in an attempt to fill the gap Michael had left behind. The prospect of embracing Luna, whose entire existence served as a reminder of that loss, seemed like a violation of her husband's memory. "I can't," Katie said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't stand here and watch you marry her, Electra. I can't pretend this doesn't break my heart." Electra's eyes welled up with tears, but her grip on Luna's hand remained firm. "Then you're choosing your pain over my happiness," she exclaimed, her voice hoarse. "I won't let you tear us apart." The words hung in the air, piercing deeper than any sword. Katie stepped back, as if struck, her hand pressing against her chest. For a brief while, she stared at her daughter, hoping to find the little girl who used to cling to her skirts and rely on her to chase away the monsters under the bed. But that girl was gone, replaced by a woman who had discovered her own power and love. Luna turned to Electra, her voice quiet yet determined. "Maybe she's right. Maybe I don't belong here. I don't want to be the reason you lose your mother." Electra shook her head vigorously. "No, you're not leaving me. We'll figure this out together." Yet the weight of Katie's words, the deep pain in her eyes, lingered like a fog that refused to clear. The wedding was postponed, and the guests were sent home with whispered apologies. The manor, once brimming with the promise of celebration, stood still, its hallways resonating with the shadows of what could have been. In the weeks that followed, Electra and Luna attempted to rebuild and find a way ahead. They relocated to a small apartment in the next town, out of the shadow of the manor and the memories it contained. Electra contacted her mother every day and left voicemail messages that remained unanswered. Luna painted stormy seas and wrecked lighthouses, each stroke releasing her guilt. Katie, alone in the manor, strolled through its empty rooms, the note still in her pocket. She read it several times, as if the words would change or provide some sort of absolution. However, they never did. She thought of Michael, the life they could have had, and the daughter she was losing because to her own reluctance to let go. The rain continued to fall, reminding us of the night that altered everything. Katie traveled to Electra and Luna's apartment one evening, just as the storm had passed and the first stars appeared in the sky. She stood outside, clutching a photo of Michael, her pulse hammering with both terror and hope. When Electra opened the door, her eyes widened, and for a little moment, neither spoke. "I don't know if I can ever fully forgive," Katie finally murmured, her voice quivering. "But I don't want to lose you. I want to try for you." Electra came forward, putting her arms around her mother with tears flowing down her cheeks. Luna stood in the doorway, a glimmer of optimism in her eyes. It was not a resolution yet. The wounds were too deep, and the scars were too fresh. But it was a start, a glimmer of hope in a story that appeared doomed. The sea raged in the distance, its waves a reminder that while some storms pass, their echoes live on, forever changing the shores they touch. The night had been filled with music and flowers, and the chandeliers dripped golden light upon the attendees. Every chair had been full, every table piled high with white roses, and tall glasses of champagne glistened with delicate bubbles. Luna, dressed in soft white lace, stood at the edge of the ballroom, shivering, her fingers clenched around the stem of her bouquet. She had been dreaming about this day since she was a child. Her hair was carefully coiled into delicate curls, and a little crown of silver rested above her brow. She could hear the violins, the hushed expectancy, and the whispers of people leaning in. She believed everything was okay until Katie stood from her chair. Katie, the mother of Electra, the woman Luna was about to marry, stepped forward, her eyes filled with fire and sadness. She was dressed in rich blue silk, and her jewelry was heavy with antique stones. Her voice pierced the air before the priest could continue. "Enough," she murmured, raising her hand as if to silence the entire orchestra. "I can't let this continue on. I cannot accept you as my daughter-in-law." The song ended. The muttering grew like a swelling flood. Luna's heart split inside her chest, and the petals of her bouquet fell one by one to the polished floor. Electra, standing tall in her tuxedo, immediately turned to face her mother. Her hands clenched. Her voice trembled, yet it was piercing from agony. "What are you doing, Mom? This is my wedding. This is the woman I love. You can't do this." Katie shook her head, tears trembling at the corners of her eyes, despite her efforts to conceal them. "Love," she murmured forcefully, "is not enough to erase what I know." The visitors remained transfixed. Nobody dared to move. Some covered their lips, while others turned away, unable to stomach the destruction of something so sacred. Luna, who had assumed Katie's stillness meant peaceful acceptance, felt the weight of rejection like a knife shoved against her ribs. She searched Katie's eyes for mercy, for any sign that this was not genuine, but all she found was a wall of sadness and hatred. "I raised Electra with everything I had," Katie explained, her voice hardening with each word. "I gave her a life, protected her, and fought for her future. And I won't let her waste it all on someone who doesn't belong, someone who carries shadows you pretend aren't there." Electra yelled back, her voice breaking. "She's not a shadow. She is the light of my life. Don't you see this? Don't you understand that this is my happiness?" Katie shook her head slowly, as if she were burying her own heart with the action. "No. I see a painful future. I see something you don't. I see a past that will not leave her. I'm sorry, but I can't let this happen." Luna wanted to stand up, defend herself, and scream that she deserved to be loved. But the words stayed in her throat, crushed by the weight of guilt and anguish. All the nights she had sobbed in secret, all the things she had never spoken, appeared to hang in the air, exposed despite the fact that she had never revealed them. Katie's rejection confirmed every concern she'd ever had, that she wasn't enough, that she'd never truly belong in the family she dearly wanted to join. Electra left the altar. She hurriedly crossed the space and grasped her mother's arm. "You can't do this to me," she said softly, her voice splintering like glass. "You can't take away the one person who makes me whole." Katie's eyes softened briefly before hardening again. "One day, you will thank me," she added. "One day, you'll see that I only wanted to save you." The silence in the room became oppressive. One guest coughed, and another shifted in their seat. The priest dropped his eyes, powerless. The flowers appeared to droop all at once, their aroma cloying and harsh. Luna averted her gaze, not wanting the audience to see the tears streaming down her cheeks. She considered fleeing, escaping before the humiliation became very severe. However, her feet were frozen, and her body was fixed to the ground like a tree in a storm. Electra went back to Luna, her hands quivering as she reached for her. "I choose you," she said quietly, but her voice was filled with terror, like if the ground beneath her was shattering. "I'll always choose you. Please don't let her words undo this." Luna wanted to believe it. She wanted to fall into Electra's arms and forget the voice of criticism, but the shadow of Katie's words pressed hard against her heart. "She hates me," Luna said quietly, "and she won't forgive us. How can we live like this?" Electra's tears were soft and quiet. She pushed her forehead against Luna's. "We will live together, even if the world turns its back. Even if my mother never spoke to me again. I can't let you go." But the pledge wavered, frail, under the weight of the family's disintegration around them. Katie had already left the aisle, walking carefully with her back straight even if her steps faltered. She vanished through the thick doors, leaving behind a silence that seemed louder than any quarrel. The wedding ended not with applause and celebration, but with scattered whispers and the sound of chairs scraping across the floor as guests silently left. Luna and Electra were left alone in the ruins of flowers and broken music, clutching one another as if the universe had crumbled. The priest closed the book. There was nothing else he could do. Days passed into weeks, yet the hurt remained raw. Katie didn't call. She did not send any letters. Electra attempted again and again to contact her, leaving voicemails that remained unanswered and sending messages that were never returned. Luna, tortured with remorse, sought to persuade Electra to let her leave, to release herself from the never-ending conflict between love and family. But Electra clung closer, reluctant to give up. Nonetheless, Katie's rejection created an invisible wall between them. They laughed less. They made fewer touches. In the dark, Luna believed she could feel Electra shivering near her, as if she were silently crying. Electra would look away immediately, shielding her face, not because she didn't love Luna, but because she didn't want Luna to see how much her mother's absence had torn her apart. Luna walked through each day with a heart divided in two, one aching with love for Electra, the other drowning in sorrow that she was the cause of the rift. She kept replaying the wedding in her head, the flowers, the music, and the moment Katie stood up and ruined it all. She imagined a different conclusion, one in which Katie smiled and grasped her hand, and the family embraced her rather than throwing her away. But fantasies are frail, and reality inevitably comes tumbling down. Years later, the anguish was still present. The wedding images were never printed. The garment lay in the back of a wardrobe, undisturbed, a memory of a day that was supposed to be the start of everything but instead became the echo of a wound that never healed. Electra and Luna remained together, but with the shadow of Katie's departure haunting them. Love survived, but it was scarred. It survived through tearful nights and silent days. It survived knowing that some fights are never entirely won, and that some wounds never fully heal. Even though they held each other firmly during it all, Luna could never forget the sound of Katie's voice breaking through her delight, the word, enough, striking her like a never-ending bell. As a result, their story was one of endurance and love even when the world seemed to deny it, rather than storybook joy. But in the quietest recesses of their souls, both women felt the same sadness, that their love, however deep and genuine, had been forced to flourish under the shadow of rejection. It was plenty to hold them together, but it was never enough to relieve the anguish.